Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the top-tier brewing stand. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil Zainashev and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. Back for another episode of Brew Strong with my compatriot, John Palmer.
Unami Namanaha.
What does that mean?
I don't know, I just made it up.
Oh, okay.
How you doing?
Yeah, somebody in the forum was saying how much they enjoyed your greetings and why, or somebody was asking why it wasn't a standard greeting every time. And they're like, no, I kind of like the randomness of it all.
Yeah, the improv,
that dynamic, creative aspect that you have.
This is my time on the stage.
Your time to shine.
Yeah, all the dreams I had of being a stand-up comedian that just never really worked. At least according to my wife. So.
Well, we also have in the studio, speaking of shine, we also have in the studio my good friend Jason Petros.
He is bald.
Here too. Yeah, that one studio light is right off the
right on the old dome, huh? Yeah. How you guys doing?
Really good.
Great.
Thanks for having me. That was a surprise announcement.
I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah.
Glad to hear.
Me too. I hope I'm not blowing anything off for this. No, who am I kidding? What else am I going to do?
Right. Well, and I'm really proud to announce I got a new John in my life. Like I've mentioned before how much I love my Johns.
Yeah.
You are really stacking them up.
I got another John. I got me a John Blickman. This one's paying too.
Yeah, it's our favorite kind.
He's the Johns that pay. Yeah.
Don't Johns pay normally? Oh, that's a different line of work.
Different line of work. Yeah. No.
Good old John Blickman.
We got John Blickman. He is the new sponsor of this show, Brew Strong, and John, you've met Mr. Blickman quite a while ago, and before the show, you're telling a story about how you've known him for quite a few years, and he's really a brewer at heart.
Yeah, he really is. He's a real brewing geek when it comes down to it, and an engineering geek too. Mm-hmm. So he's put his passion into making brew pots and the Therminator, the plate chiller.
Mm-hmm. Beer gun.
I have a lot of his stuff, and it always works great.
Well, and you got one of those top tier systems, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had built my own rim system last year, and it was fun, but I got to swap out the valves because I wasn't getting enough flow through the valves and so on I was using, and then running the hoses like through the bed of the bench proved to be a little bit cumbersome. Having to crawl under there during the brewing session was kind of a pain. Yeah. So. Yeah, I got a top tier just because I like the simplicity of it, the elegance of it.
Nice piece of equipment.
Yeah, and it wasn't a piece of crap.
Wasn't a piece of crap like your previous one.
Not like the one I made. Yeah. Right. So it works great. I was really impressed. And Jamil, you and I have talked about efficient, extraction efficiency and so on, and hitting your numbers. And you've talked about how critical hitting your volume is. Mm-hmm. Well, having a sight glass in each of my brew pots is just monumental. I mean, it makes hitting your numbers so easy because you know exactly how much volume you're working with all the time. I was amazed. I figured in the past I only needed a sight glass in say my HLT in the hot liquor tank, but having them on the mash tun and having them on the brew kettle really helps.
Well, Justin and I went out to the Northern Brewer grand opening in Milwaukee, and they had one of those top-tier systems there. And I'll tell you, it's a thing of beauty. And... and sweet engineering design. A lot of really clever little things that you wouldn't think are important on a system, but once you see them in action, you realize the brilliance of the design. Like, you can adjust this thing up and down, all the levels of it. And even the holders for the brew pots, they adjust in and out. And you could use the same. One of the things that people like to brew, bigger batches, smaller batches. You don't want to brew, 10 gallons of everything, or 20 gallons of everything, or 5 gallons of everything. Sometimes you want to brew 5, sometimes you want to brew 10 or 20. And with that system, you can just adjust your pot holders out, and there you go. Now you're working on a different size system. It's really brilliant, and just every little aspect of it seems really well manufactured. I was very impressed. And supposedly I helped brew I brewed a beer there on the system, but really that amounted to me talking and drinking beer and then throwing in some hops at the end.
There you go. You inspire people just by being around them, I'm sure.
That's right.
See, you should have been there,
That's
Palmer.
what I've been saying.
Because all I kept saying to him was, Jamil, aren't you going to do something today? But Palmer's glass is half full. And
that's right. That's why he's my buddy.
He just raises the bar by standing there.
That's right.
That's right. I can hold up the end of a bar. Absolutely.
I got to work on my keeping you up skills.
That's right. Right. Blowing smoke up my...
Yeah.
That's what you got, the smoke blowing aspect. You really got to work on that.
Yeah.
Put that in your review.
Yeah. Justin, you've really got the bar aspect covered. You got to just...
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Well, and, they got the top tier, they got the Therminator, they got the beer gun. If you're into homebrewing at all, you've heard of these things. They're revolutionary, The quality of the build is very high. The quality, the engineering thought that went into these things is very high. John Blickman is, an engineer by trade, and has put a lot of that engineering skill into developing these things, and it really shows. And so, if you're not familiar with them, go by their website, www.blickmanengineering.com, and Blickman is BLICH. MANN, and then hopefully you know how to spell engineering.
I didn't, but most people do.
Right. And if you just sort of type something that sounds like Blickman and engineering in a Google search, they'll find the right
for you.
I love Google.
Google has the "Hey stupid" factor.
Did you mean to spell this correctly?
Hey stupid!
Yeah.
You're looking for this, aren't you? Yeah, Google, I am.
But go by the website, check it out. You find a lot of interesting things. And one of the things that's great about Blickman as a sponsor is that you can buy Blickman Engineering equipment at your local homebrew shop.
Yeah,
and you can support your local homebrew shop, and you can support the sponsor that's making this show possible. They're making this show possible for you to hear for free. So you listen to this for free. Well, John Blickman is paying for it.
He's
paying cash money so you can listen for free. Let him know that you appreciate it. It's the least you can do. If you can, go out and buy some Blickman Engineering equipment. If finances don't allow that, an email is cheap and free. Let them know how much you appreciate it, and go at least check out their products at your homebrew shop.
And the beer gun and thermometers, and so there's some very affordable Blickman stuff too. It's not all the brew stands,
right?
So
and here's another thing that I thought was really cool that I really loved, and I hadn't seen it before. It was the thermometers in the sides of the kettles. Right, they were on a swivel, so the ones that were lower, you could tilt it up. And you could read the thermometer from, without bending over and trying to look through at the side. Or if it was higher up, you could bend it down, and so you could just easily read the thermometer every time.
And you got that bad back of yours that goes out every now and then.
That's right, Grandpa Multi here.
Yeah, you like that bendy thermometer,
right? Oh no, I just thought, it's
a good idea.
One of the reasons, you can make great beer with pickle buckets and all that stuff. But, the great thing.
Great.
It's news. The great thing about equipment like this is it really it helps provide a consistency and an ease of brewing, and it really does improve the beer through how it affects the process. So it doesn't fundamentally change the process, but the way you interact with it, absolutely facilitates it. Good word there, John. And my word of the day. John's like my my word of the day calendar there.
Yeah, we're kind of like the Mythbusters, just
with less talent.
With less talent,
yeah.
And
less money, less viewers,
and the hot sidekicks.
And less hot chicks to do work for you.
Yeah. Okay, we need to work on that.
Right, we do. All right.
Yeah. Well, now that we have a great sponsor, maybe we can put some of that money toward getting more hot chicks on the show.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and
maybe just more Nate Smith, but he can sit in the corner with that long hair. You never know.
Yeah,
right. Okay. Well, why don't we get to our topic of the day, right? Which is a question that came in from Chris Taylor.
Here you go.
Hi, John and Jamil. It's Chris from Melbourne, Australia here. I had a question I thought you guys might be interested in discussing on one of your shows. Basically, I know we go to a lot of effort to measure things like amount of sugars in our beer with hydrometers and temperatures and other factors. There doesn't seem to be much emphasis on measuring IBU levels in your resultant beer. And a lot of times seems to be based on faith of the alpha acid reads in the hops packets rather than any measured factor. So I'd love to hear some strategies on how we could get a better understanding of what the actual IBU levels are, how we account for hop aging, strategies for reproducibility of bitterness in beer, and also strategies on determining qualities of hops. Anyway, thanks again for the great show, and hope to hear about it soon. Bye.
Well, I thought that was when I first got this question in on the request email, which is brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. We got it got me thinking, where those formulas come from and how they were formulated and how much it mirrors reality. So we actually are going to have quite the special guest, aren't we, John?
Yes, we are. One of the pioneers of hop utilization, Mr. Glenn Tinseth.
All right, yeah. And if you've been around at all, you've probably heard of the Tinseth formula. Most of the brewing software has that as one of the selections, at least. And a lot of people consider that the most accurate of the formulas.
Wow.
So why don't we do
this?
Guest. There you go. I tell you, we bring them in. We bring them in.
Right.
We got JP in the studio.
Well,
we got Tinseth. All right, let's do this. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll hear from Glenn, and we'll get into hops. Back after this.
Right. Brew smart.
Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
From the stovetop to a camp burner to some kind of brew stand, most homebrewers follow some version of this progression. With each move, a homebrewer will often have to change a lot, if not all, of their equipment. Until now, Blickman Engineering brings you the top-tier brewing stand, the only brewing stand that grows with you. For example, buy a top-tier floor-standing burner now, and it'll bolt right to your top-tier brewing stand when you're ready for all-grain brewing. The top-tier brewing stand is perfect for 5-gallon to 20-gallon batch sizes. Its modular design is adjustable and accommodates everything from small footprint coolers up to 30-gallon pots. How does the top-tier brewing stand do it? At its core is a strong, heat-treated, and anodized aluminum main post. On all 4 sides are built-in T-slots for the adjustable heavy-gauge stainless steel shelves and beefy burner tiers. The tiers accommodate any manufacturer's pots or coolers up to 21 inches in diameter. Best of all, not only does the top-tier brewing stand grow with your skills and equipment, but it easily knocks down for long-term storage or transport, too. The top-tier brewing stand from Blickman Engineering. Learn more at blickmanengineering.com and to find a local Blickman retailer. And start brewing from the top tier.
Downtown Joe's, located in the historic Oberon building in beautiful downtown Napa, California, offers an award-winning brew pub experience from 8:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day. For 15 years at the corner of 2nd and Main, Downtown Joe's has been voted Best Night Spot 7 times and Best Brew Pub for the last 4 years in a row. Brewmaster Colin Kaminsky's handcrafted ales, like his Tailwagon Amber Ale and Catherine the Great Imperial Stout, are the perfect accent to riverside dining, live music, and a relaxing outdoor patio. Don't miss the Beer of the Month, special rotating taps, and happy hour all day Mondays. Visit downtownjoes.com to make reservations, peruse their extensive calendar of events, or just read more about their fantastic beers. Come enjoy the fine beer, food, and music. Downtown Joe's, the award-winning brew pub where you'll feel at home.
Where were we? You stole an oak barrel from the mist of Ravenwood, and Lord Zinfandel the Avenger is in pursuit. Do you drop the barrel and run? Hell no.
We need it for a Flinders Red.
I'm gonna cast Pediococcus damnithus on the barrel. Sorry, your ghosts are imprisoned in his winery forever. Ugh, I hate it when Greg's the brewmaster.
This sucks.
What do we have here? Orville Rodenbach?
Buzz off, guy. We got a brew session going. Is that an actual beer?
Yeah, I crafted it. I don't really use the dice anymore. I'm a 10th level beer nerd.
Are you a 10th level beer nerd? Do you get a long-lasting foam stand when you think about wheat malt? Then you're in good company at Northern Brewer. Northern Brewer has all your beer nerd needs, ingredients, equipment, and knowledge at northernbrewer.com. Plus, fast, cheap shipping, only $7.99 for the contiguous USA. And check out Northern Brewer's huge selection of dorky beer kits, including the pre-prohibition lager.
Perfect for steampunk.
And the single hop best bitter.
Now on cask and 10 forward.
Make 10th level at northernbrewer.com.
In the past year, the Brewing Network has been able to add 2 new shows, expand our studio capabilities and quality, and bring more beer information home to you than ever before. In no small part, this is due to subscribers like you. Thank you from all of us at the Brewing Network. Without your monthly support of any denomination, we could not bring you the very best in live beer radio like Can You Brew It, Brew Strong, and the Sunday Session. Haven't signed up yet? Join your fellow brewers in the BN Army. Sign up today at thebrewingnetwork.com for a recurring donation as little as $2 a month. Besides all the great live radio you'll support, every subscriber is automatically entered in monthly raffles for amazing brew gear like a conical fermenter, a temperature control system, or your own draft setup. Become a part of the BN Army today.
Hilo, what's it feel like?
Take awesome and multiply it by 2.
Yeah! Spraying live beer radio all over your face.
Can't get any better than this, baby.
It's the Brewing Network.
Like the Lance Armstrong of the beer world. Except for that nut thing.
This is Brew Strong.
Okay, now I got to apologize to our sponsor already, but, that nut thing. So one morning I wake up, honestly, one morning I wake up.
There's a story behind that comment?
Well, the Lance Armstrong with the nut thing. Right. So I wake up one morning and my right testicle is, I swear to God, 4 times larger than my left testicle.
That's a man, right there.
It's like a good size russet potato.
Had you been squeezing it?
No.
You been in my sleep? I'm a nut squeezer.
I don't know. I wake up. I'm just like, I don't know how your hand ends up down there when you wake up in the morning, but
it's called
suffice
magic.
to just say it does. And you're just like, wow, something's not right here. And then you're checking out the size of things, and like at least 4 times larger. I'm like, holy crap. what happened? And I'm thinking, well, I got to wake up the wife, call the doctor, And in the course of 15, 20 minutes, the size starts going down. Within an hour, they were the same size again. What the heck?
All right.
Oh, man.
Probably had something twisted, and then in the course of feeling it out, it untwisted.
Right,
and then,
right. They must have had some twisted sister or whatever they call it.
I don't know what the kids are calling it these days.
I think that is the medical term, is twisted sister.
Well, there is testicular torsion.
Yes, which it sounds like you were... Yeah, well, yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, holy smokes. I'm thinking, how do I get the other one that size?
Apparently you squeeze it, like Palmer said.
Right. So, anyways, on that fine note...
we were talking about hot bags, and that's what got it.
We're talking about hot bags.
Yeah.
No, we've had some difficulty getting a hold of Glenn Tinseth. Hey, Glenn, if you're listening, call the studio, 888-401-BEER, and we'll put you right on the air. Apparently, our crack team has not quite come up with the correct phone number for Glenn, and
he's on too much crack,
having some difficulty.
Yeah,
I know Glenn's
the operative word.
Glenn has been standing by all this time. I know he is.
He's there somewhere.
We just cannot reach him via phone. So, Glenn, if you're listening,
888-401-BEER.
Or if you're sitting next to Glenn, give him a poke. Tell him to pick up the phone.
Maybe he's passed out.
Yeah, right. Maybe he's been drinking. Maybe he's got one testicle 4 times larger than the other one. I don't know. But the great thing is, what I was thinking we were going to do this show was go through Glenn's formulas and how he came up with the formulas and that sort of stuff. But there's a lot to this question. And I think
lots to utilization.
Yeah, and I think Chris had a lot of interesting questions. And I was thinking this is going to go for 2 shows anyway. So what we'll do, we got our in-house expert, John Palmer, and he even wrote a nice article about this. Was that for BYO? Or?
Yeah, that's for Brew Your Own last year, yeah.
And we got JP, we got myself, and we even have Justin. So let's forge ahead, and let's talk. Let's answer some of these questions. One of the interesting things that I saw in Chris's question was, any methods to approximate the actual IBU levels in the resultant wort, rather than just taking the faith in the brewing software, et cetera, et cetera. I was interviewing Mitch Steele from Stone, and one of the things that he was giving me in his recipes was like, when I would ask for IBUs, he'd go, IBUs in the finished beer is 95. In the wort, it's 120. It's it's in this, it's 60. In this, it's in the wort, it's 80. And I was, I realized, and I kind of knew this ahead of time, was, pitching rates affect the number of IBUs you have in your finished beer. Filtering, a lot of different factors affect how much the IBUs the finished beer has versus how much the wort has. So your brewing software, your calculations, that's going to tell you how many IBUs in your wort. It's not going to tell you what really necessarily you're going to get in your finished beer. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of factors that are going to affect that, right?
That's right. The whole utilization model is, what you're trying to do is figure out a fudge factor for how much of the alpha acid is not going to end up in your beer. And so you're really throwing the dice. Mm-hmm. But as long as you throw the dice consistently and assign a number to that, you can brew consistently. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what the hop utilization formulas and the IBU formulas do for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of Chris's question was, all right, so, do we trust the, alpha acid percentage on the hop package? And, does that really, along with the software, the formulas in the software, does that really tell me what's in the wort?
Well, let's tackle the first part of that question. The percent alpha on the foil packet or the plastic bag that you get from the brew shop, that's probably a number that was given to the shop owner from the bale at the hop warehouse where he got them from. Two factors affect alpha acid. One is, temperature, and the other is oxygen exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So if, and I got to back up to, your hop form also makes a difference. If you have loose hops versus pellet hops, the pellet hops are going to resist oxidation much better than the loose hops or leaf hops, because the center of the hop pellet isn't as exposed to oxygen as as the whole hop cone is in loose hops.
Well, those hop pellets, they almost have a slick surface on them. It's like they're almost varnished, from the pressure of the extrusion.
Yeah, the heat sealing, and so they have a lot better stability. So the amount of oxygen exposure that they've gotten to that point is your first factor.
Mm-hmm.
Now you need to kind of guess at what temperature they've been stored at.
Mm-hmm.
The colder they've been stored, the more stable the alpha acids and the oils and so on are. They, lower, as Charlie was telling us a couple of weeks ago, there are Arrhenius equation governs how fast a chemical reaction occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of oxidation reactions, a change of 10 degrees C doubles the reaction. So the colder you keep your hops, the better they store.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had hops in the freezer that, they're 2 years old. I figured, they've, and these were loose hops too, but they were well packaged. But I figured after 2 years in the freezer, they'd probably lost, say, 50% of their alpha.
Mm-hmm.
And I brewed with them, on that basis. Well, the beer turned out a lot hoppier than I expected.
Right.
And so that, keeping them cold really helped preserve their potency.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because if you're keeping them at minus 20, right? The reaction with oxygen is much slowed. So I used to worry about the oxygen packaging of my hops, but that's really just important if you're at warmer temperatures. If you're at freezer temperatures all the time, you fold up the end of the bag and seal it with a rubber band or a piece of tape, and I think that's pretty good. I've kept hops for 3 years or so, and I used to worry about adjusting for alpha acid, the lost alpha acid, and maybe it's the increase in beta that I'm getting, or something that's offsetting, or something like that. But
that could happen too.
I noticed very little difference over the course of years with hops that were fresh initially and well cared for initially, like I got from More Beer. I put it in the freezer and just take out what I need, and years down the road, I'm not adjusting my recipe at all. And maybe I'm just not noticing the difference. I would think I would notice any sort of significant difference.
Well, if you can open that hop bag, it's been in the freezer for a couple of years, and you still smell fresh hops, you still smell, good aroma, then you've preserved them well. When you pull them out, you don't get a whole lot of fresh hop aroma. If you get some of the cheesy notes, but if you're not smelling that fresh hop aroma, now you can say, okay, I've probably lost a significant amount of alpha.
Or if they're yellow or loose, the pellets have started to fall apart,
Right. The more they turn brown, the more they're oxidized. So if you pull some hops out of the freezer that have turned all yellow and brown, then yes, they are definitely oxidized. And I've had some like that.
Well, JP, what about you? Have you used any older hops? Have you done any experimentation with that sort of thing as far as leftover hops maybe at the shop that
No. I'll just let that float. No,
that's a fine answer.
Thank you. I haven't, and maybe I'm lucky to a certain extent because I have essentially a fresh supply of hops. So to back up a little bit, John, you are absolutely correct. What you get on that foil packet or that Mylar bag or whoever you buy it from is exactly what we get on the bale. Mm-hmm. So we only know information that is coming from, in our case, Hop Union.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to Ralph about stability of pellet hops for a couple times, and he says, and I'd actually like to see information on it, that they've kept hop pellets in storage without any alpha acid degradation for 5 years.
Right.
Wow.
Degradation, I should say. Which seems
if it's cold,
amazing.
I'd believe it. Because everything happens, things just don't. If you get it cold enough, things just don't. All that chemical, action that's going to happen in order for it to degrade, it requires certain things to happen. Yeah.
What I was kind of piqued my interest, John, when you were saying there's a exposure to oxygen will delay the or will enhance or increase the amount of alpha acid that's reduced or lost. Thank you. I don't know why I'm having such a problem right now. Do you have any sort of let's say 10 minutes equals 2 points lost or whatever? Is there kind of a sliding scale on that? Or because I'm thinking about the guys who go into like bulk hop buys, who they'll get a bale or they'll get 5 pounds and then they'll sit there and split it up into whatever ounces, and so maybe the hops are open for 20 minutes, half an hour on the kitchen counter while they split it up with their friends or whatever.
Right. I haven't seen anything like that. No.
Okay.
But I think the more time it spends warm, the more times you warm up those hops.
What is warm though? What is warm to you? No, I mean like when you say warm.
My one really huge testicle was quite hot.
It was quite warm, yeah. Well, the story was pretty hot too. But I mean, is it like 50 degrees, or are you talking warm like room temps like 70, 80?
It's all relative. So every 10 degrees C, is doubling the speed of the reaction, right? So
what's the speed of the reaction? I'm just trying to figure out trying to figure out what that actually means, because to me that doesn't mean much because I don't have a.
Well, I agree. So we really need to run some tests on hops sitting at room temperature, let's say 62 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, and then run some analysis on it and see what's happened to the. I would imagine, just a guess, but an hour or two is probably not going to have that much of an effect.
I wouldn't think
once
so.
you get up to a day or two, then it really starts to have an effect.
Talking about oxygen,
right?
Yeah, there was a paper published in the American Brewers Society, American Brewing Chemists Society,
ASBC.
Yes, that's the one.
American Science Society of Brewing Chemists.
There we go. Yeah, that's what I get for trying to talk and look at my computer screen at the same time.
Lick your computer screen?
Did I misspeak? Yeah,
maybe.
There was a really good paper on it where they had left a bag of hops. I think it was in the freezer, but they had punctured the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And left it, basically so it was cold but getting exposure to air.
Mm-hmm.
And they had X amount of degradation of the alpha. I'll try to find it. So if you guys keep talking about interesting things, I can maybe find it.
So JP, have you had any testicle adventures?
I have, actually.
They're different than yours.
Yeah, they're way different than yours.
Well, and so
they don't involve mine.
The interesting thing, though, is I still got to believe the majority of the effect is due to temperature. It's possible that it could be. Just oxygen, but I think you get it down to absolute zero, then there's no way the hops are oxidizing, right? Because the degradation is really just oxidation hops. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Another in-depth answer.
When you guys say 10 degrees C doubles the alpha loss, 10 degrees C, every 10 degrees C from what? What's your starting point?
Not necessarily. Well, accelerates any sort of reaction, right?
I found the paper here.
Oh, great.
Put in. Yeah. Sorry, JP.
No, that's fine. It's your show, man.
That's right.
That's right.
Don't you forget it.
It says that they had let's see, a fresh hop beer had 22 IBUs, 23.5 ppm of iso-alpha, determined by HPLC. Then they had an aged pellet beer, where the bag had spent 1 year at 50 degrees F in a punctured oxygen bear bag.
That's a problem. 50 degrees.
Yeah, 50
Fahrenheit.
degrees F.
And that's warm. That's close to room temperature.
But that beer
problem.
only had 3.6 ppm of iso-alpha.
Right. Well, and the other issue would be they're measuring the finished beer, right?
Right. And these guys, they also kind of a twist on the experiment, which makes it hard for a homebrewer to kind of replicate, is they purposely added more hops to get the same number of measured IBUs in the finished beers, 22 IBUs in both beers, where one was made up from 23 ppm of iso-alpha, the other was made up of 3 ppm of iso-alpha, plus a lot of oxidized beta acids that, and of course the way, and this is something that we're going to have to talk about a little bit more in a minute, the way that IBUs are actually measured in industry and around the world is by spectrophotometry, shining a light beam through a sample of the beer and measuring the amount of absorption in the beer.
Well,
so it measures hop stuff. The standard test method measures hop stuff, not iso-alpha. To get iso-alpha, you got to go to a different method.
But here's the thing that bothers me about this. If they're measuring the finished beer, like we were saying before, pitching rates, the condition of the yeast, filtering,
evaporation,
a lot of different things are going to affect what your finished, hop material is in there, right?
That's the problem I have with a lot of these.
That's why it should be measured on the wort.
Yeah, well, in articles and stuff like that, where people go, well, these two homebrewers decided to find out the truth behind this thing. Well, you're doing an experiment at home in uncontrolled conditions. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've located Glenn, and why don't we take a short break? And when we come back, we'll talk to Glenn Tinseth about his formulas and all things hoppy. Back after this.
Keep your carboy cap on. This is Brew Strong. We'll be right back.
Hey, what are you doing, man?
Writing a review of WLP 400.
What? You're reviewing yeast?
Yeah. White Labs has home brewer reviews of all their strains. Are you new to these interwebs? Check it out.
That's awesome.
White Labs, your source for great yeast, invites all brewers to visit whitelabs.com to read and write your own reviews of all their yeast strains. Get real-world tips and tricks from other brewers who have made the most of their vials and post your own experiences. It's another way White Labs brings you closer to the best yeast on the planet.
And send.
There you go.
You misspelled flocculate, dude.
What?
White Labs. It's all in the vial.
Hi, this is Push from the Brewing Network, and I want to tell you about the Brewmaster's Warehouse and how you can get 10% off your next order. I'm a pretty techie guy, but I've never seen an online store like this. It's awesome. Go to brewmasterswarehouse.com and click on Brew Builder. You can whip up a custom recipe so easily even Sven could do it. Seriously, it's slick. You can share your recipe with your own logo and notes to the Brewmaster's database if you want. And the best part, it keeps a running tally of the beer you're building while you're doing it. Then, bam, click Buy Recipe, and your cart is filled and ready to go with helpful suggestions in case you forgot something. This thing is amazing. Brewmaster's Warehouse is run the way a home brewer would do it, with great service, fast turnaround, and $6.99 flat rate shipping. Brewmaster's Warehouse and the Brew Builder blew me away. Check it out today at brewmasterswarehouse.com. I'm serious. And don't forget to put BNARMY in the discount code box for 10% off your order. Check out brewmasterswarehouse.com. Cheers.
BN Army members, are you looking for a discount on hops? Keep listening. Nico's Homebrew Supply at nicobrew.com has hops by the ounce and by the pound. Choose from varieties like Amarillo, Centennial, East Kent Goldings, Holler Tower, Simcoe, Summit, Tomahawk, Warrior, Willamette, and more. And adding new varieties all the time, many for less than $20 a pound. Whether a couple ounces at a time or an 11-pound bag, all hops are shipped vacuum sealed and frozen straight to you. Nico's Homebrew Supply offers store-wide $5 flat rate shipping and won't waste your money on unnecessary overhead or advertising. They're going bare bones and passing the savings on to you. The staff at Nico's Homebrew Supply loves to brew and is committed to keeping homebrewing affordable and accessible to anyone who wants to join in this great hobby. And for a limited time, use coupon code BNARMY at checkout for a Brewing Network discount. Visit nicobrew.com. That's N-I-K-O brew.com for your hops and more. nicobrew.com, your bare bones buddy in the brewing business.
This holiday season is one of gratitude, giving, and winning. More Beer says thank you to all their wonderful customers with deals from Thanksgiving through New Year's, in addition to low prices, free shipping, and the More Beer deal of the day every day. And one lucky customer is going to win Regan's Big Fat Package, the very first More Beer pressurizable conical fermenter. Rolling out just in time for the holidays, it's their brand new redesigned stainless conical line with a new threadless racking port, new stand options, and a new pressurizable lid. They're giving away one of these new pressurizable conicals on December 31st. For every order you place with More Beer between November 1st and December 31st, use the coupon code CONICAL up to once every day to enter yourself into the drawing. Go to morebeer.com for more details. The 2009 More Beer season of winning. Win yourself some great deals and maybe even a brand new conical fermenter. Enter today only at morebeer.com.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to your hosts, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. Putting the testicles in technical. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking hops and how you figure out IBUs and all that in your beer. And we have on the line with us Glenn Tinseth. Hey, Glenn, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. Sorry about the difficulty in getting you on the line. I know you've been standing by since 6:30.
Yeah, the problem being that I can't type my own phone number.
Right. Well, the question is, all right, so we're supposed to trust the formula from a guy who can't get his own phone number right? Is that correct?
Well, normally I have people who do this for me.
Yes.
Don't worry, Glenn. I can barely spell my own name, so we'll be fine.
And he only has 2 letters in his name.
Yeah. Well, I did work on editing your first edition, so I know.
All right. So, one of the things that I think you're really well known for in the homebrew community, at least, is your hop formula, your hop utilization formula. And it's many folks consider to be the most accurate of the hop formulas that we have out there to use. You want to give us a little background on how you came up with your formula, how you developed it, and what you think of it today based off of how it's been out there?
Sure. One of the background pieces that a lot of people don't remember anymore is that it all started with my hop business, the Hop Source, way back when hops were packaged in little Ziploc bags. I was one of the first people to figure out that maybe an oxygen barrier bag might work better. And I lived in Silverton, Oregon, which is right near many of the hop fields in Oregon. And so just the whole synergy of it made it seem perfect to have a business out of my basement. And at the same time, I was working on my PhD at Oregon State University, where the USDA hop labs are. And because I'm a perfect example of a procrastinator, I found it much more fun to spend time in the USDA hop labs than finishing my dissertation. But so what I did there was, while packaging hops at night and trying to sell them, I would trade grinding hops for the USDA hop labs, specifically Gail Nickerson and Al Honnold. And then I got time on their instruments to do analyses, and it was a fairly mutually beneficial arrangement, I guess. But so I just started out on my own. I brewed a whole bunch of batches, took samples throughout the boil. Also hooked up with one of the brewing folks on campus and gathered a whole bunch of samples from their pilot brewery and did analysis after analysis using the spectrophotometer, and gradually came up with an empirical shaped curve. And being a chemist, I was able to fit it with basically a first order chemical kinetic equation, more or less.
Okay. Yeah, it's as kind of a natural reaction, chemical. These things usually aren't linear. At least maybe they'll be linear over short distances, but when you try to model something over a long period of time, they tend to be nonlinear, don't they?
Yeah, and one of the things that set me off at the beginning was, at the time, I think the Rager curve from the
Jackie Rager, huh?
Yeah, it showed more of an S-shaped curve, which didn't make sense to me, just chemically. And so I thought, well, let's do some investigating. And I went to the Oregon State Library, which had a ton of brewing journals, luckily, and just grabbed data set after data set from Guinness and from Asahi in Japan, and even managed to score some back the envelope sets of data from Sierra Nevada, and none of them matched the S-shaped curve. They all matched the curve that I was working on, and so I figured I must have been onto something good, and just refined it a little bit more. It put it out on the Homebrew Digest. I mean, this was, in 94, I think, 93, 94, and it took off from there. I mean, funny thing is, it's been on the website since 92 or 93, I think, and luckily they're still hosting it at realbeer.com.
Well, now, so your equation obviously is based off of the isomerized alpha acids in the wort at different stages, giving you the formula. And one thing that always fascinates me is I could take that wort, the same wort, and I could ferment it with different strains of yeast, different pitching rates, perhaps different temperatures. I could filter it, not filter it, and I could end up with a variety of ending beers with different IBU levels. Isn't that correct?
Right. And so you're distinguishing between utilization in the kettle and final bittering units in the beer. And there's so many variables that you can't test for. I mean, I basically checked gravity and boil time. And, you're talking about, pitching rates and flocculants and whether or not you filter and how good your hot break was and your cold break. And, there's just a million. pH and there's other, I have correspondences going on with people all over the world of research they'd like to do. And it's all stuff that I would have liked to do. But, when it comes right down to it, who is it going to be useful for,
Well, and I found that really interesting. There's another brewing podcast out there that did an analysis of the different formulas, and they analyzed a bunch of finished beers, and they calculated everything out using several different formulas. And I applaud that effort, but the cynic in me was saying, well, it's a bunch of nonsense because you're measuring the finished beer. And they were using different yeasts, they were using different pitching rates, they were using different brewers. It was like, well, it's meaningless. Really, your formula could be, 100% accurate for the wort, but, I think that's the disconnect. The disconnect a lot of homebrewers have between they're thinking that that's going to be the finished IBUs in their beer, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And in fact, from the beginning, I've always told people this is a great formula for the brewery that sits in my basement, given the tests that I've done. And I always tell people, look, this is a tool that has nothing to do with the actual IBU number. But if you use this tool and continually taste your finished beer, you will have something that's useful to help you predict how the next batch is going to turn out. But it won't give you anything related to what the actual IBUs. I have people saying, well, your formula calculated 21.3 IBUs. And I said, well, plus or minus 5, right? And they totally got upset because most of them are engineers. And they want as many sig figs as their calculator gives them.
Well, and that's what I've always said is the formula could give you A through Z. And a given beer is S, and if you want less hops, go to M. And if you want more bitterness, go to, Y. It really doesn't matter. You're just it's just a kind of a signpost as to where you're at, and you vary from there and adjust for your brewery. It really doesn't matter what the finished IBUs are. Does it taste right? If it's not bitter enough, go more. If it's
but you're underestimating the power of control that a home brewer desires
to have.
Yeah, because they read it online, or a lot of the breweries are now kind of, well, not now, but it's a lot more, I think, are starting to list their IBUs, and they're starting gravities in gravity instead of Plato, and kind of relate to the homebrew, so they can kind of get whatever. But working at a homebrew shop where we're trying to sell kits, people want that IBU range, and if it's 5 off, if our kit is 5 IBUs less or greater than their target idea in their head of what, let's say, a Vienna lager should be, we get smoked. We get bashed on forums. I mean, and it happens across the board. So what I'm kind of understanding is there's no way for a home brewer to know exactly what their IBU is unless they get it tested.
That's right.
But absolutely.
And so these levels are for, and this formula is for a guideline of this is what 35 IBUs taste like, ish.
Right. Well,
and we need to be comfortable in that, or is there a way for us to be able to dial that in?
The formula is always consistent. The formula is not changing.
No. But the way you brew,
right? If your brewery remains consistent, your equipment is the same, your process is the same. If your pitching rate is the same, and your yeast strain is the same, and all your processes are the same, you can trust that the formula, when you increase what the resulting IBU should be, your resultant beer will increase as well, and you have control over that.
So the relative increase will be accurate based on the formula.
Right.
But the numbers still may not relate to the actual HPLC or spectrophotometric numbers. Because my brewery was a 10-gallon brewery in a half-barrel keg, and it was with a jet burner that just cooked the crap out of it, and yours may be on the stovetop in a 5-gallon ceramic kettle that you do partial boils with. I mean, there's no way of relating those two numbers. But still, if you're consistent, like you mentioned, and all of your parts of your process are consistent, then it will help you predict how your next batch will taste compared to this one.
So if your batch is not bitter enough for you, just increase it. Or, if it's too bitter, back off, and you should get the result you're predicting for your brewery at that time. It may or may not have any relation to, real-world IBU numbers, but that's not really critical.
And I on the website, I give a couple adjustments that people can make if they really want to dial the formula into their actual numbers. I mean, there's enough flexibility in the formula that there's 2 places where they can tweak it. And if you want to do repeated testing at a lab, come back and tweak the formula, test again. You could probably dial it in, but who wants to spend that kind of money?
I can think of a few people off the top of my head.
Well, maybe homebrewers, but none of the professional brewers I know.
No. Oh, so what points are those that you would tweak?
If you look at the page where I describe the formula, there's a long exponential, and there's two that will adjust the shape of the curve, the steepness of the initial part of the curve, and the quickness at which you get sort of a diminishing returns. And it describes two numbers that you can just tweak, and I don't even know how to tweak them because I only ever brewed with the one brewery and matched my numbers specifically by adjusting the parameters in that formula. And what I suggest people to do if they really want to fine-tune it is do a bunch of samples all throughout their boil and then adjust those parameters so that the curve they get matches the model's curve. I just can't, necessarily see anyone benefiting from that. But like you said, there may be a bunch of listeners who would.
Yeah, well,
some even have spectrophotometers that I know of. I know of at least 2 homebrewers who have spectrophotometers.
Yeah, I got one. Absolutely. Doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
Come on.
Sometimes the reward is in the journey, though, Some people really like that. I like how I got real deep and philosophical right there.
Well, I have a brewer in Australia right now who's doing a series of 20 different brews, testing all along the way. He wants to test maximum solubility, and to find out his theory and mine as well is that pretty much 100 IBUs is as much as you're going to get, and that anyone who says they have more is probably lying. There's some solubility limit to alpha acids, and I'm guessing it's not much more than 100 bittering units before you're not going to shove any more into that beer. But I didn't do the research. He is, and we'll see how that goes.
Well, and for the listeners, it's like trying to dissolve, sugar in iced tea. You can dissolve a certain amount in there, and you stir and stir and stir, but eventually, you keep adding, it just won't dissolve anymore, and you see the sugar granules drop to the bottom, and no matter how much you stir, how much you try and dissolve that in there, it just won't dissolve. And it's there's a certain limit to how soluble something is in a solution, and it's the same thing with the hop alpha acids that you just reach a certain limit.
So at a certain point, you're just adding more flavor necessarily. Maybe let's say.
Right. Now
there's a bunch of other things dissolving. Yeah. I also suspect that not only is it just the hop solubility, but total dissolved solids, because you've got a bunch of grain stuff in there as well. And that the higher your gravity, probably the lower the total overall solubility will be for hop alpha acids. I mean, again, I'm just guessing based on how things happen chemically in other systems, but it all makes sense if this would behave the same way.
Yeah, it's just solution chemistry, in other words.
Yeah, and I want to get back to the fact that whatever formula you use, whether it's Garrett's or Rager's or any of the newer ones, the consistency is the key. I mean, I don't make any money if anyone uses my formula. I just want people to realize that it's not the actual number that the formula kicks out isn't necessarily the IBU number, which we've already mentioned, and that it's just a tool to help them become more consistent in their brewing. And that's always, at least as far as I'm concerned, should be our goal.
It's a measuring stick.
Yeah. Exactly. Without any definite units on it necessarily.
Right. And I like that. I like that approach.
I tell people, if you've started with a certain formula and you're a bunch of brews into it, stick with that formula, because you're learning what a given number in that formula tastes like in your given beer. And so, that's part of the process. Learn how the formula represents what you brew. And then you can use that to dial in anything. And when you come up with a new recipe, you're able to, use that formula to predict what you're going to get. And, don't... and some people are changing formulas, every batch. I'm like, no, you don't want to do that. You're not going to learn anything.
Well, just because your software allows you to do that doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, because there's I've noticed at least a 20-point swing sometimes between the two formulas.
Well, especially if you're dealing with the older formulas with the S-shaped curve and you're looking at short boil times, there's a huge difference because they have this initiation period where there's no isomerization And I just didn't find that to be true. I mean, as soon as you start heating it, you start getting something into the wort.
Right, and one of the things that I've used Rager all this time, because that's what the default was, and that's what people started me out with when I started brewing.
Yeah,
and all these batches later, I'm not going to change. But when I look at a recipe, or we do a show, Can You Brew It, which is where we clone commercial beers. And when somebody gives me a recipe that has a lot of late hops, I start to target my IBUs differently in the recipe. I'll make an adjustment, and I'm like, well, this isn't the IBUs they told me, but I know, having used this formula for so many batches for so many years, I know I need to change this. I know this is the right amount. Just trust me on this. I know it's going to turn out right.
Yeah, your process has adjusted to compensate for the formula.
Right. So it'd be great if I had started with your formula and it was a little more consistent for me, but it's too late for me. I'm down that road where the way my brain works when I'm looking at a recipe and I'm looking at the IBU number, I'm like, well, no, this is what I need. So.
I always get questions about, well, how do I adjust your formula for pellets, or how do I do this? And being a scientist, I just say, look, I never explored that. I have no data to reflect. Here's the things I've heard from other people. Al Kersonis says this. John Palmer says this. You're just going to have to go on your own, because I'm not going to tell you. I got nothing for you.
Well, and I would say, if you're always using pellets, or if you're always using a hot bag or something like that, it's always going to be consistent. I mean, it more likely than not, if you're always doing the same consistent process, the formula works, and you just need to learn whether you need to increase or decrease from that point. That's what it's going to tell you.
Right. One of the things I learned brewing this last summer was that it's not as important on a pro level that you're able to predict how things are going to come out. The importance is that every single batch you make is exactly the same. When you're brewing XY Pale Ale, the person who's drinking it has to taste the same thing every time they open the cap. And, they could care less about what formula they use. The head brewer at Mad River, where I worked, didn't use my formula, so I gave him a lot of crap. But he said, look, we had tests analyzed, and we know how our equipment works, and we know that if we do this, then this happens, and we don't really need a different formula because our recipes are dialed in. And before we ever bring anything to the big brewery, we do 18 pilot batches,
Wow.
And so it's consistency, which I always try to bring back to the home brewer. If you can predict what your beer's going to taste like and then brew it, and it tastes that way, then you've done a great job.
Right. I think that's a big part of homebrewing is, homebrewers make so many new recipes or look at so many recipes that, that's why the software and the formulas really hold so much importance to homebrewers, because it's like, well, I may only brew this recipe once, or, this is something I'm trying off the cuff, and they want it to turn out right. They're not going to do 18 batches to get them, dialed in.
Right, but they also, though, need to make sure that whatever software they're using, they've adjusted it to match their yield and their efficiencies and everything else. And then, man, they're golden. And whether it's a crappy little spreadsheet that I wrote, 15 years ago, or ProMash or whatever else is out there, it has to be adjusted for whatever your system does.
Yeah. Then that's what I like about your utilization curve, Glenn, is that it's got enough basis in real chemistry and behavior that I can look at a recipe published online or on a website, and I'll look at the way they describe the hop character of the beer, and I'll look at the rough IBU level they're looking at. And because I've always, I've always used this formula. I know how it works in my brewery. I know how it works for me. And I will adjust, I'll use that formula to ballpark the IBUs where I want them to be. And that way I can take a new recipe and create the beer that I wanted. It's because I've gotten used to using the formula, I've gotten used to using my equipment, and I can adapt a recipe to produce a beer that I'm envisioning or seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one trick that I've found is tough is when you have beers like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lagunitas Hop Stupid or Russian River Pliny the Elder.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Try to duplicate either of those without hop extract, and you're going to run up against the brick wall. And they don't tell you. Well, Hop Stupid does, but you don't always know what the brewer's tricks are that got the taste that you like. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can guarantee without hop extract, you're not going to be able to brew either of those two beers.
That's true. We, I have the Vinny's homebrew recipe, the original without the extract, but it does taste different than the commercial one available. And extracts are weird. They throw people for loops sometimes. You're absolutely right.
But they add an amazing taste, and
yeah.
And it just that's one of the things where I think there's still a little mystery involved, because we've got these other interesting ingredients that we really can't put into our spreadsheets, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah, like so much brewing. A lot of geeky guys tend to gravitate towards brewing, but there's a lot of art to it, and a lot of inconsistencies that the brewer makes a difference.
And you can't brew everything with malt extract and a handful of hop pellets. You've got to get the right ingredients to duplicate a beer that you want.
Mm. Sure.
Yeah, that's definitely sure. I mean, any sort of huge finishing hop presence, or in the hop back, or however you want to do it, dry hopping. I mean, try to do that with pellets in the kettle. It's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all over.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a short break? Glenn, if you could stick with us through the break. We've got some listeners that are going to want to ask you some questions, so we'll be back right after this.
Brew right. Brew smart. Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
When Blickman Engineering set out to design a great brewing stand, they knew it had to be strong, adaptable, and last for a lifetime. The top-tier brewing stand is now proudly available at BlickmanEngineering.com. It grows with your brewing skills and equipment. Start with 5-gallon coolers on its heavy-gauge stainless steel shelves. Then move all the way up to 30-gallon pots on the high-output burner tiers. Speaking of burners, the custom Blickman Engineering top-tier burners are extremely powerful, efficient, and amazingly quiet. They have safety stops to center your pot, and they'll last a lifetime and won't rust. The top-tier brewing stand allows virtually infinite combinations from traditional gravity systems to 2 tiers to completely horizontal. Configure your stand the way you want and have the freedom to change it at any time in the future. Your brewing stand should adapt with you, not force you to learn a new process. Visit BlickmanEngineering.com today to configure your top-tier brewing stand and to find a local Blickman retailer. You'll be surprised with all the flexible features and the competitive price. Start brewing with Blickman from the top tier.
Nico, listen, our lawyers said that we had to do this for 1 hour, and after this, we don't have to talk to each other for 3 more months to the next meeting.
Kids, come on, let's get out of here.
I'm supposed to have more lines. I'm the professional. Hey, it's Sully.
And I'm Nico.
And we opened the 21st Amendment 9 years ago at 563 2nd Street in San Francisco, just 2 blocks from Giants Park, to make great beer and have a great time doing it.
That's right, because to us, the 21st Amendment is more than just the right to make beer. It's the right to experiment, to be innovative, and just do things differently. And so now, we're putting our craft beer in cans.
That's right, cans. You can find our world-famous Hell or High Watermelon Wheat Beer and Brew Free or Die IPA throughout California and Alaska.
And now it's also available on draft at select accounts in the Bay Area.
So next time you're at your local neighborhood pub or good beer store, be sure to ask for 21st Amendment in cans.
Because everyone likes it in a can.
Tasty crack cans.
Tasty crack cans.
Williams Brewing is your online resource for prompt delivery of quality home brewing supplies. Since 1979, Williams Brewing has offered the finest equipment and freshest ingredients and the best customer service in the business. Cut hours off your brewing sessions by using one of our 11 varieties of famous Williams malt extract. Our Williams Belgian Pale Extract is mashed with pure Belgian 2-row malt and a small percentage of Belgian wheat malt for an authentic Belgian character you just can't get from other extracts. Or check out our unique fermenters, 2.5-gallon kegs, paintball tank-based draft beer equipment, bottling aids, and much more. We even have our own line of precision hydrometers. Go to williamsbrewing.com to browse our vast selection. That's williamsbrewing.com. Orders placed by 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time ship the same day. Brewing is easy. The Williams way.
There's an app on the iPhone for just about everything, including beer. Apps for finding a pint of beer. Apps that look like you're drinking a pint of beer. And now, there's an app for brewing a pint of beer. Introducing BrewPal, the most all-inclusive beer brewing app for professionals and hobbyists that fits in your pocket and goes wherever you do. Recipe formulation that can be imported and exported with a customizable database. Mash and sparge calculations, yeast pitching rates, carbonation tables, and more. Available right now for less coin than a pound of grain. See BrewPal in action at brewpal.info and download it for your iPhone at a special introductory price right now. BrewPal, all the brewing software you need, right in your pocket.
This is www.thebrewingnetwork.com.
Sit down next to it, grab yourself a paper towel, and watch those yeast have sex.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking everything about hop utilization, and we've got the famous Glenn Tinseth on the line. Glenn, thanks again for joining us. It's a real pleasure to speak with you.
It is.
You know, I've never had a chance to chat with you, email or otherwise. So it's nice to get to know you a little bit.
It's been fun also to be here. I did a little research once John asked me to do this, and I realized you guys have a really great thing going there.
Oh, cool. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You know what I like about this is I assume, this is how dopey I am, I figured this, the Tinseth formula was, made by some guy in a, high button shoes and a bowler hat in like the 1800s, and that's just what we've been doing. But I had no idea that there was.
Glenn does ride one of those bikes with a giant front wheel and a little wheel in the back.
Yeah.
That's
where you get I wear a beret. So.
Great.
It's just kind of cool to get like a modern, at least there's still research going on into something that's important as
I could name a star after you for Christmas if you like, JP.
Well,
would you like to?
What about current hop research? John and Glenn, do you have any insight into what people are doing right now? Glenn, you mentioned kind of that people are looking at ways to predict IBUs better, or what was that you mentioned earlier?
Well, the one thing that one of the folks who had written me talked about was this upper limit, or solubility limit, and that he had seen references to 200 IBUs and 250 IBUs, and one of those he actually tested himself. I mean, this is a very ambitious, person. He found it only had 92 IBUs. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that all the research and data I had gotten from Sierra Nevada years ago showed that Bigfoot never went above 100. And Bigfoot is just obscenely hopped when it's fresh. Mm-hmm. And, they would take it as far as they could go. And so this person and I in emails had just discussed that, maybe 100 IBUs is a limit. So he's doing a bunch of research. I just was reviewing my emails today, prepping for this show, and it made me curious again to see how he had progressed. No. But also, there's pH, and there's kettle geometry, and there's boil vigor, and there's yeast flocculation, and so many other things. How good of a chiller you have, and do you use an immersion versus a counterflow?
Yeah, I think hop alpha acids they behave like oil and water to some extent, but they're at the same time they're sticky, and they tend to stick to any of the surfaces you're using in your brewery.
Well, and that's why the yeast cells, the higher the pitching rate, that tends to be the lower the IBUs, right?
Yeah. You mentioned, Jamil, another podcast, Basic Brewing Radio. A while, I was probably, I think 2 years ago now. They conducted an experiment where they had several different brewers brew the same recipe and measured the IBUs in the beer of each of these brewers that brewed the same recipe, and then calculated using each formula what the predicted IBUs for that beer were. And everything was ballpark, pretty much. Some were a little closer than others, until they got to a German Hefeweizen, and where they had predicted, I think it was 27 or 30, they got 18 measured. And it really, it confused everybody on at the time and on the show. But when you think about the effect of yeast and yeast flocculation, it makes total sense that you have when they do an IBU extraction, they strain out the yeast, and the yeast are sucking up a lot of the alpha acids that you would be getting in the beer.
And they're present so much longer in a Hefe. So they would have more chances to
scrub it out.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, and this is one of the reasons why they even have processes for debittering yeast. Is those isomerized alpha acids will coat the exterior of the yeast cell, and what happens is actually the viability of the cell drops because of that coating. It's why hops were added for their preservative quality to beer. It tends to coat the cells and prevent them from, replicating. Same thing with bacteria and all that. That coating is really what stops those cells from replicating. So it's clear, obvious why, the amount of cells is going to affect the amount of your bitterness in your beer.
Yeah, I think if that show had done a test at 12 minutes into the boil, then we would have really seen whose formula is best.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, and I believe that 100%. I think that's really what you can tell. You can measure in the wort at a given pH and a given volume. I bet you the shift between the brew pot and the burner you used and the water you used and the pH you had versus something that I'm using is probably not wildly off. And if I am off of what your results, it probably tracks that adjustment probably tracks all the way throughout the boil, and it would be fine all the way. And so I could make a little tweak and I'd be 100% in line with your formula. The real difference comes in other parts of the process, I would think.
Well, I think one elephant in the room that we haven't even spoken of is how accurate are your hop analyses, and how long has it been since that bale was tested?
Right.
And that 200-pound bale, they only take one or 2 little pokes, you know.
Right,
So what are the odds that your hops are actually 6.6% alpha?
Right.
So there's so many variables. That's why I always tell people, don't think this comes close to any real number.
Well, especially with it's popular to use something like a Magnum or Horizon, some of the higher alpha acid, clean bittering hops, and if you use those in a beer that doesn't require a lot of IBUs, again, a slight miss in the analysis, or if you're not measuring your hops accurately, if you're measuring your hops, to the nearest tenth of an ounce or something like that,
and then round up to a half,
and it's one of these high alpha hops, that's a significant difference in a low IBU beer. I imagine you could be off by double.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at, we had basically a 20-barrel brewery at Mad River, and when we used for our least hop beers, certain beers had pellets, and certain of the pellets were very high alpha. The small amount that you would use in that huge amount of beer was very indicative of what you just said. A small mistake would make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's like you said, or also to Glenn, that especially in a professional brewing situation, you've got to make this batch taste the same as the last batch, so you can't afford to make those small mistakes.
Right.
Well, and one of the things, if you're homebrewing and you're making a low IBU beer, don't use a high alpha hop. Your measurements are going to be far more accurate if you use a lower alpha hop, because if you make a mistake, that kind of ameliorates the mistake and makes it your tolerance level goes up for as long as you use something that's lower alpha acid.
Plus, it'll probably be a lot more tasty too.
Right.
Well, Glenn, what are some of your favorite hop varieties?
Well, I was thinking about that since we had emailed earlier, and I'm going to present this in 2 parts. The most recent part is my experience this last summer brewing professionally. One of the most amazing hop experiences I had was this. We basically brewed a Belgian golden ale as a specialty this summer and used sterling in the hop back. I think it was about 6 pounds of sterling, and so you run the hot wort through the hop back into the whirlpool and through the chiller. It was the most amazing, perfumey, hop memory that I've ever had. I mean, it was just, you stick your head down because you're bending over, stirring the hop back around, and it was the most amazing aroma I've ever smelled from a hop. Not anything like any of our piney West Coast hops. It was just astonishing. So sterling is one of them. And the other from the summer that struck me as a really sort of odd hop to like was Brewer's Gold.
It's an older one.
Every time I filled the bucket, because we measured hops by the pound, from Brewer's Gold, they were so sticky and so aromatic and so gummy, and just the essence of hoppiness. It was just astonishing. It made me rethink, some of my prejudices from before. So those 2 hops basically stuck out over the summer as something that I would encourage anyone to check into again if they hadn't before.
Yeah, I would never have used Brewer's Gold. Just because of the name is kind of 60s, 70s.
It's so ancient and old.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. It was one of the few hops that you would we always wore gloves to get to the hops because you work so much with them, but it would just coat them with so much resin and gumminess, and just astonishing. And so the other ones that I would like to throw out are, because I've always been an IPA fan, and I always like to just do insanely weird things with dry hopping. And so 2 things finished off as something I would like to share. Nugget as a hop, which I don't even know if you can get anymore.
Yeah, you can get Nugget.
Can you? Using it as a finishing hop in the final end of your boil, it really gives an amazing aroma that you wouldn't expect. The original, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Pyramid Brewery. They had a beer called Snowcap. That at one time was actually good. And I had a friend named Anders Johansson, who long time since then went to work for Deschutes and a couple other breweries, but he gave out an original recipe for Snowcap that we used every Christmas, and 4 or 5 of us homebrewers would try to brew it because we loved it so much. And it had a ton of nugget in the finish, and it was an amazing experience because you would never use it. It's this high alpha, not very clean hop. And so there's another. And then the final one is Chinook.
Oh, I love Chinook.
I first used it as a bittering hop, and then because I was out of everything else, I once dry hopped with it. And it gave the most amazing fruity, pineapple-y aromas that made me use it many, many times later. I mean, I'm saying almost heresy here to use these high alpha hops in the finish, but that's the kind of thing that I like to encourage people to do. You know, don't just use the hops that people tell you to use. Try weird stuff. And Chinook as a dry hop is a weird thing.
Sounds like a Brew Strong new tagline. Brew Strong, try weird stuff.
Well, I find so many people just get bound into, you know, back then it was Byron Birch and Charlie Papazian, and you had this huge book of recipes, and, you know, you didn't vary from it, you know. But you guys, and nowadays, it's much more likely that people are going to go nuts, especially with, you know, like Sam Coglione with Dogfish Head and these other breweries that are doing amazingly weird things.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility as homebrewers to not follow, but to lead.
Yep.
That's true. That's
There's
very
another
true.
tagline for you.
Brew Strong, don't follow, lead.
I think Glenn is dry hopping out on the freeway right now.
I'm letting the dog out, sorry.
Just checking.
I think he's just so high on hops, he's just playing on the freeway.
Well, and Glenn, you've been awesome, and you know we've taken up a lot of your time, but you got time for a few questions from the chat room?
Absolutely. I have permission from She Who Must Be Obeyed for as long as I need.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay. I hope you're not talking about the dog that you're walking.
No.
Okay, good. I do have a few questions from the chat room. They've been great. Happy to hear what you have to say, and we've got some intelligent questions for you. So you know they didn't come from this room. Can the alpha acid delta between the wort and the finished beer be predicted? Is it yeast strain dependent?
Well, I don't have any data on that, unfortunately. I would say, you know, the more flocculent your yeast is, the less the less loss in alpha acid you're going to get. But, you know, it's only one of many factors.
Well, and you also have, you know, cell size. So, you know, the greater the surface area, the more surface area you have, let's say you have a certain amount of yeast mass, but it's made up of a lot of much smaller cells, you're going to have a lot more surface area.
Right.
And, you know, it's really, you know, surface area versus contact with the beer. If you know, as that yeast is tumbling through the beer during fermentation, you know, that amount of surface area. So, you know, different strains are different sizes. They're all pretty much about the same size, but some are smaller, some are bigger. Certain stages in their health and their growth, they're bigger or smaller. All those things can affect it. I imagine if you really could, you know, get a consistent, you know, process down in growing yeast and pitching pitching the same rates, you could determine, you know, the effect each strain has on finished IBUs. And, you know, same thing goes for filtering. your filtering process, the speed of filtering, the how tight you're filtering your beer, things like that, all would also be somehow predictable. I think. I imagine it could be, with enough data, I think you can predict almost anything.
Yeah, I just don't. Again, I see it as a diminishing return sort of thing. Most of us settle into a few yeast strains that we probably have on. I mean, if you're like me, you have on Petri dishes and you work up yourself. But however you do it, you're not going to use 18 different yeast strains, and you're going to get used to how each one behaves. And so you probably, if you're using 3 most of the time, you're going to know that one is more likely to scrub bitterness out than others, and so you'll take that into account when you formulate your recipes.
Well, and I wonder if that's part of the, people in the past have talked about yeast strains being more malty, and it's clear they really meant malty sweet, malt sweetness versus malt character, and malt sweetness, I wonder if those yeasts that tend to favor malt sweetness over hot bitterness are really ones that tend to pull more isomerized alpha acids out of solution. I wonder if there's any. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've read hundreds of papers, and I've never really seen any that followed this path. It's a very interesting idea. And
I think he's just working on job security. Like, what other show? How many other shows could I build off of this? Well, let's see about this.
Yeah, because, the compensation I'm getting here is so huge that I do want to extend it out to multiple...
Glenn, I think we'll sign you up for a series of at least half a dozen.
I'd be more than willing to do that, but only if I get some sort of fan uprising and seeing people dry hopping with Chinook.
Okay.
I think that's a done deal.
I'll try Nugget next time.
And I'll double your paycheck from this show, Glenn.
There you go.
Now we're working.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Glenn is capable of doing math, and the trick's not going to work.
Not like the rest of us.
Damn it.
No, you had me. Sorry.
All right, another good question from the chat room tonight. How does beer color change the way we have to measure IBUs using a spectrometer? Won't less light make it through a darker beer, therefore giving a misleadingly high IBU number?
Well, the spectrophotometry that we use is at a specific wavelength. What is it? 275 nanometers?
Something like that. I forget.
Yeah, and so it's designed to have 2 factors. One, it only absorbs by the things you're interested in, and you have a blank that you run it against that takes into account all the other things. And so we typically are able to totally take care of anything like that, and it's not an issue in the analysis.
Okay. All right, another question for you, Glenn, is what do you think of bitterness from first wort hopping or mash hopping?
This first came up many, many years ago, and George Fix, I don't know if he's still a part of the homebrew community, but he was one of the... Huh?
Unfortunately, no. He passed a couple of years back.
Oh, no. He was just one of my heroes.
Yeah.
He did some big experiments into first wort hopping, and I didn't. And so I think, John, when I read your article, you had a little bit of a question or two about maybe whether that could account for some of the reduced bitterness.
Yeah.
Due to the protein, the hot break.
Yeah, the hot break taking some of the alpha out. Yeah.
Right. So I could see that happening. I just don't have any real data, and I hate to make speculations based on not having any data.
Well, I'll tell you this: I've taken part in some first wort hopping experiments where I've been sent beers that were blind to me, and I've given them to groups of people, and having them characterize. Bittering and hop flavor and aroma. And the results have always been that the majority of people, when given a first wort hop beer, find it to be more bitter. And to have less hop flavor and aroma. And I can always pretty much pick out what the First Word hop beer is just by it's more bitter.
Got it. And just to possibly back that up a little bit, the person asking this question said he tried it with one of his IPAs, and he didn't change anything else except for doing a First Word hop, and he said it was way too bitter.
Unless you do it side by side, though, it's very difficult to. You gotta have the same brewery brew the same beer. Everything the same.
Split the batch, right?
And give you, and this would be split batch and give you the same beer, because you really your mindset changes these things, and you can be convinced of anything, but doing analysis on these things, the IBUs of First Word hop beers are greater than the non-First Word hop beers, so it does have higher IBUs. Perception is they are more bitter. So,
this would support the typical curve. I mean,
right? I would just extend the curve out for whatever time involved. That was my take on it.
Okay, and one last question from the chat. They were talking in the chat about pulverizing hops for dry hopping, and the question was: think there's any real advantage to doing this? Is it the same as just using pellets?
Well, one of the things you have to be careful with is that you don't heat them up when you pulverize them. And one of the complaints I always had against hop pellets was that unless they did it under liquid CO2 or some other process, they were losing some of the more volatile components just due to the mechanical heating of the pulverizing process. So depending on what process they use, if they could do it somehow and keep them cold, I don't see a problem, and they would certainly get much more exposure in the dry hopping. But if there's any heating at all involved due to the mechanical process, I would say don't do it.
Well, I remember Ralph talking about that.
For the listeners, so if you ever put like spices or something like that in a frying pan, if you're making a curry or something like that, you heat it up, and all those aromatics come out, and you can really smell those. When they make hop pellets, they take these hop cones and they run them through a hammer mill that it just pounds them into a dust, a powder, and a lot of heat's generated from that, and then all that powder is forced through an extruder that turns them into those little rabbit pellets, and forcing anything through down and compacting it generates a lot of heat. So that's what Glenn's talking about. That same thing happens to the hops, and obviously you're losing some of those precious volatiles. Now, my thought was, well, at least for me, the pellets are consistent. The hop aroma I have trapped in those pellets early on, if I keep them cold and protected, 6 months down the line, I've pretty much got the same thing, and I can count on the consistency of it. Am I crazy to think that at least I'm gaining consistency?
Well, no, not at all, because the best of the pelletizing processes use liquid CO2 to keep the whole thing cold.
Cool.
And they have that glaze on the outside that's going to prevent any further oxidation, especially if you've stored them badly. If you've stored them well, then I don't think you're gaining much between whole hops and pellets. But still, you absolutely are gaining consistency as long as you're happy with the initial product.
Cool.
That's what we had from the chat room today, guys.
All right.
That's it.
They were just listening to you guys.
Well, they're all family members too, so it's pissing me off.
Well, that we only gave them 4 hours notice that we'd be on. But for me, you've been fantastic, Glenn. I really appreciate you spending all this time with us and bearing with us through technical difficulties and all that. It's been almost 2 hours that you've been standing by for us, and it's really appreciated. I got to have you back on again. I think we only scratched the surface of Chris's questions about hop utilization and hops in the brewery. So if we can have you back again, I'd really love to.
Yeah, I can even get my phone number right.
All right.
Well, I have it written down if you can't, so it's all right, Glenn.
Well, thank you again. I think it's been a great show. I think what we've learned is that the formula, the Tinseth formula at least, is consistent across the wort boil. And I think we can all trust that. It's going to be different for different types of equipment, and it's going to be different. Your resulting IBUs are going to be different based on your yeast pitch rates and things like that. But the thing you count on is the formula doesn't break or something like that. It's consistent across the boil, and you can use that to dial in your adjustments. We talked about first wort hopping and dry hopping and some of Glenn's favorite hops. Lots of great information. We even talked a little bit about hop aging. The important thing being keeping those hops as cold as possible. Not letting them sit out warm. That's really going to have the major effect on having stable hops.
And away from oxygen as well.
Yep.
Right. Now, one other thing, I'm sorry to throw in, but if you could at least send people to look at the website to see the source, it's realbeer.com/hops.
Realbeer.com/hops. Great.
And that's where I've lived since the early 90s.
All right. Okay, so thank you again, and I
really appreciate having you on.
No, I appreciate being asked, and it was a real honor to be here.
Well, thanks.
All right. So if you get a chance, check out our fine sponsor, Blickman, BlickmanEngineering.com. Again, you can pick up his products at a vast number of homebrew shops across the country. You can even find that information on the website. They've got the beer gun, the Therminator. They've got stainless conicals. They've got that really cool top-tier system that John Palmer uses in his brewery. If you get a chance, tell John Blickman that you love him because he gets this show for you for free. Okay? Anyways, good show, everybody. I think we kind of started to delve into a very huge topic, and I think we got at least one more, if not two more shows on this. Yeah, we did 5 shows on the water Ganza. I think it's Hop Ganza time. Hop Ganza, folks. We're gonna do a bunch of shows, and I want to have Glenn back. He's an excellent guest. Anyways, until we're back, make sure you brew strong, brew often, brew strong, and don't forget we're gonna have a live Q&A show coming up. So stick around. You can ask your questions, any questions on any subject, as long as they're sort of brewing related. We'll be back with another show right after this. Until then, brew strong, everybody.
Lead with weird stuff.